Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Steve Bresnen. I'm here on behalf of Texas Family Law Foundation in favor of the bill. May I give these to the clerk to pass out? I think it's very important to read bills when you're talking about them. And in this case, the penalties that are associated with this bill could only be imposed if the removal was frivolous for the purpose of delaying the state court action or avoiding an unfavorable decision, filed for the purpose of gaining an advantage over the other party, or filed for the purpose of causing damage to another party in the state court suit. What I'm having passed out to you is, this is as of last session, 18 examples that were readily findable by me of cases that were family law cases, removed to the federal court, routinely slapped down, except the slapping down takes anywhere from 5 or 6 months to 18 months. Meanwhile, by federal law, the state court action in this family law matter is stayed. So you can imagine trying to get child support, trying to get your affairs in order, all of that cannot be done when people engage in this tactic. It is always returned. The federal courts don't do divorces. They don't do child custody matters, and they don't do child support. They're always returned to the state court, but the federal court has to go through the process. And let me just say, as a matter of personal privilege, I'm so happy to have my testimony from last session corrected. If you paid close attention, you can see why I would be happy to have my testimony corrected. This bill seeks to stop an abuse that's being used to get leverage on the other party. It hasn't one whit's chance of doing, it's always done pro se. I've never seen a lawyer attached to any of these. If they are, I can be corrected on that. But the fact of the matter is, this is an abusive tactic. It harms the state courts. It harms the other party. It harms everybody who's affected by the process, and it needs to have an end put to it.
Chair recognizes Representative Wu.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, if an attorney had done this, if a licensed attorney had done this and transferred to the federal court, I mean, that's basically grounds for malpractice, right?
Yes, sir. I believe so.
I mean, because you're doing something that clearly is not allowable by practice and not allowable by law.
Yes, sir.
And you're just like blowing through money, and you'll probably be liable for damages to the other side for making them spend attorney hours going through this.
Yes, sir. It's an abusive tactic, and something needs to be done about it. All this does is give the state court a way to defend itself in the course of the state litigation. And by the way, a good many of these people, and the ones where I can actually get down to the final order, were ordered to pay fees to the court for a frivolous lawsuit, although difficult to collect.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions for this witness? Chair recognizes Representative VASUT.
I'm not James Tallarico. Sorry, it's a joke. I moved. So, you know, with a legislation like this, I'm always thinking about, is there a gap in the current law? So do Texas courts not currently have either a statutory or a rule authority to be able to assert sanctions if somebody, you know, currently violates the process and removes the case solely for, you know, advantage or the disadvantage of the other side?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Between the Civil Practice and Remedies Code provision and the Rules of Civil Procedure, they're styled in terms of things that you file in the state court. All the state court does is get a notice of what you filed in the federal court.
Don't you have to file a notice of removal, though?
You do, but I believe the filing for purposes of those penalties is in the federal court, not in the state court.
Yeah, so
I did some research on this before this was done. I can find no record of the state court ever doing anything except being stuck the whole time.
Yeah, because as I recall, when I practiced in federal court, you know, when I remove cases, non-family cases, we file a notice of removal in the state court, which would be a filing, and I would wonder whether or not that in and of itself would trigger Chapter 10, Chapter 9, CPRC. You know, because the effect of filing of a notice of removal, we know, it stays.
Yes, sir.
Stays the litigation. So that's the problem. So, I mean, just the mere filing of a notice of removal, that ought to trigger sanctions. But if that's a gap, then, you know, happy to look at it. But, you know, there is no we don't want the federal government in the marriage business, right?
No, sir.
All right. So, you know, from a states' rights perspective, this is a very strong conservative position from federalism. You know, the state law is the one that governs the marital relationship as opposed to the federal law.
Yes, sir. And it's important to note, this is an interstate organized effort to do this. They're putting pleadings up on the internet, and they're just downloading them verbatim and signing them and ship them off. And if I commend those to your reading sometime if you want to see something that will boggle your mind.
Got it. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Do
sir.
members, any other questions?
Thank you all for your service to Texas.
Thank you for your testimony. Chair recognizes Chair Dutton to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I think you've heard enough about what the problem is and what the cure ought to be. I think you heard from people who suggested they were against this bill, and not for good reasons, but for the reasons we need this bill. And so I will leave that with this committee. We had this bill. We did have it last session. And I don't remember, I think it got passed and somehow or another got stuck in calendars with all the stuff that was going on. But anyway, I leave it to this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Okay. House Bill 913 will be left pending.
Back away from me. Back away from me.
Okay. Just seems like you're going to hit me or something.
No, I wouldn't. If I was going to, you'd be on the ground right now.
No, it wasn't our hidden camera Steve Bresnen was all mad about. He was being secretly recorded by a Texas father fighting for a law on equal parenting. Who's Steve Bresnen? He makes up to $1 million a year lobbying.
You have electronic equipment on you that you're taping oral communications up here?
So maybe it's time for Texas lawmakers to remember the Texas Family Law Foundation represents lawyers. Lawyers who make more money when parents fight instead of getting along.
No further communication with me, sir.